I bet you've seen those election polls about Congress that say essentially, sure, throw all the bums out. Except for my congressman or woman, they're fine. They should be reelected. And I kind of had the same reaction when I heard about a racist incident in Golden that was recently revealed. Oh, I thought there hasn't been anything like this in Golden for like 100 years. I thought that was totally in the past. I was naive, to say the least. Here's a very concise version of what has happened recently, if you haven't heard. Golden city leaders have recently announced that a deeply disturbing and racist act occurred within the Golden Fire Department in March. Specifically, a Snoop Dogg doll was found dangling by a rope, some say a noose, in a fire department stairwell. A city employee has been fired. The Golden Fire Chief is on administrative leave. There is a lot to process here, so we decided that episode 40 of this Faithful Resistance podcast should feature a conversation with Reverend Jen Simon, Assistant Minister at Common Flame, our Unitarian Universalist congregation. We are so glad today to talk with Reverend Jen Simon, the Assistant Minister at Common Flame, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And Reverend Jen, I've given just the barest description of what I understand happened at the Golden Fire Department with this racist incident. And I think you've been looking into it quite a lot. How did you learn about it?
I was actually alerted to it by some of our congregants who live in Golden and who follow, the goings on in town anyway, and especially are interested in the structural, systemic, and policy areas of city governance.
What's your basic understanding of what happened? The basic facts.
Yeah, so as I understand it, and there are people out there who have way more information than I do, but my understanding is that there was a snoop on a stoop, which is kind of like an elf on the shelf, that was at the fire department, had been there since the holiday season, and was just something that they were playing around with. He moves around the fire station the way an elf on the shelf does, and this was fine. And I guess the Snoop doll, who is a black doll that's supposed to look like Snoop Dogg, they kept moving him around after the holiday season, which was fine until someone decided to hang him by his neck in the stairwell. This happened in March, and it was brought to the attention of folks at the fire station as well as the city manager, but it was not taken further than that. So there was some kind of reprimand for the employee who did it, but there was no public or citywide announcement. There was a consultant brought in for DEI training. But most people did not hear about this incident until late last month in July, when some other city employees got hold of the information, found out what had happened, and really put out an alarm that more needed to be done about this situation. And so since then, it has come to the attention of the READY task force, which is racism, equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's been in existence in Golden since, I think, 2023. And this is something that really they should have had a hand in as soon as it was found.
I mean, to keep this quiet for this long just seems outrageous.
It is an obvious failure in transparency. And especially, we have city staff, city employees who are BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so when they found out about this, they were obviously upset. But yeah, we have safeguards in place that the city has been building with the encouragement of a lot of residents to handle these sorts of incidents, but it seems to have been bypassed in this instance.
I read recently that and I don't know how this plays into it, that the fire chief is on administrative leave. Do you know that that's true, and whether it's related to this? It seems obvious, but it is a conclusion I'm jumping to.
Yeah, they were put on administrative leave, and as far as I know, they still are. Also, as of yesterday's city council executive meeting, the city manager, Scott Vargo, has been let go. In this instance, there was a real concern about the lack of transparency and the lack of, I don't want to say willingness because I don't know how the decisions were made, but the lack of contact with, for instance, the Ready group and other folks who are part of the structures in place to deal with this sort of incident.
You referred to structures that were in place, and I must admit that I'm not familiar with them. Do you know much about them and how they were bypassed?
A little bit. The one I know the most about is the Ready, that's REDI. And that was put in place a few years ago. And their whole reason for existence is to advise on questions about racism, this sort of event, and to help with information and education around anti-racism stuff. But they found out about this incident at the exact same time as the rest of Golden, which was not ideal.
Weeks and weeks and weeks after this had happened. That go back to the outrageous adjective. What's your understanding of why it took so long for this to come out?
My understanding is that it was probably never going to come out if other city employees didn't hear about it. I think the steps that were taken in March when the incident happened between some of the firehouse leadership and the city manager. And of course, the consultant was called in as well, and there was some training, which is great. That's one of the things that needs to happen when this sort of racist incident occurs. But there's a feeling, I think, that it was hushed up, that the city, or at least the folks involved, didn't want it getting out to the public. And this is the kind of thing that the public really needs to know about. This is something that can have an effect on people doing their jobs. Racism is trauma. And if people are being attacked in this way, then they're not going to be able to do their jobs properly. And that's a problem.
Trust is the key. It is such a key element in working for something. And it was acknowledged in some of the statements I saw that the city manager had made, is the lack of trust. But I'm curious, when members of the congregation came to you, what did you read in their eyes along with their words about how they felt about this?
They were pretty upset. These are folks who are very involved to begin with in city and county politics. They were members of our Common Flame CAN group. Excuse me. And so they have been doing policy work, mainly around housing, but around other issues as well. And so these are city and county structures that they're very invested in. These are systems that they've helped build and that are supposed to be accountable to all of us. And so they were first off very upset that this is something that would happen in a City of Golden building. And also very concerned that that the BIPOC members of our community, especially, about what we can do to make them feel safe. And because this, a lynching in effigy is something that really, really impacts, especially our Black folks, with the history of terror, especially in Golden. It's well known that if you've studied local history, it's well known that Golden was kind of a KKK stronghold about 100 years ago, as was a lot of Colorado. But folks used to go up to the top of South Table Mountain and burn crosses so that they could be seen far and wide in this area. So this is all kind of couched in the context of Golden's history and and BIPOC folks especially are sensitive to that.
I shudder to think at those who would hear about this and say, "Oh, it was just a joke. It was just a prank." And what would, if a person had the nerve to say that to you as a minister or a human, what would you say?
I would say that it was a prank in very poor taste and judgment that we don't do in 2026. I can understand somebody possibly being young and thinking, oh, we're going to make a racist joke, and it's just a joke. But nowadays, with all the study we've done on the history of this country and how Black and Indigenous and other folks have been left out of the history and how they've been terrorized, it's just not an acceptable joke to make. It is something that is known to cause terror in our non-white neighbors. And I count myself as one of those, being a Black biracial person. The history of cross burning, of lynchings, both real and in effigy, have always been used to terrorize non-white communities, and it's just not acceptable in our city government.
What role do we have as a congregation in Golden to make a statement and possibly take action after this incident?
Yeah. So we have already put out a statement on our socials, and we have also I submitted that statement to the city council yesterday, so it should be available on the website about this. So the first thing is to make our values known and our stance on this known, which we've done. We're also doing some of that work in our mosaic groups, which are small groups to learn about the history of racism, both in our area and in our denomination, white supremacist ways of being that have always existed. So we're learning about that. We're also doing part of the racial justice team is doing a racial genealogy of our land, where our congregation is and how we came in possession of that land, and how it at one point was inhabited by the Ute and the Arapaho and the Cheyenne. All of this, it can seem like different topics, but it's all part of learning about the history of BIPOC folks in our country and the way that they have been marginalized and disenfranchised in our government systems. And so we are doing that. We're also trying to start to form relationships with different communities in and around the Golden area. So we have started financially supporting the First Nations group nonprofit that is based in Fort Collins to help give them support in the work they're doing, which is really teaching youth and bringing back some of the traditional languages and the traditional crafts and foods of different native peoples, and they support that with film projects and that sort of thing. And so we're trying to get proximate to Black churches as well. That's kind of a relationship in the making, because Unitarian Universalists are not all white, but we have been a majority white denomination. And we have not always done a great job of recognizing and respecting our own BIPOC members and contributors and heroes in our traditions. So there is a lot that's going on at Common Flame, both inward and outward directed, as we continue on our anti-racism journey.
Do you by any chance have the statement nearby at this exact moment to give us an idea of what we said as a congregation?
I could pull that up real quick. Hang on. Here it is. Shall I read the whole thing?
Why not?
Okay. As a Unitarian Universalist community of faith, Common Flame wishes to express our absolute condemnation of the disturbing racist incident at the Golden Fire Department last March, where a black doll was discovered hanging by its neck by a noose. We understand that for our Black community members, this was not an isolated prank or a minor lapse in judgment, but an explicit act of racial terror that evokes the systemic history of lynching in the United States, as well as the specific history of the Ku Klux Klan in Golden. This act has harmed City of Golden firefighters, staff, and members of the wider Golden community. As Unitarian Universalists, we honor the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Thus, we believe we have a sacred duty to engage in the lifelong work of anti-racism. We call for greater transparency from our representatives, which did not happen in this case. We fully support the implementation of a third-party investigation and stand with the members of the Race, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force as they push for structural reform. Nearly every religious tradition requires us to value each and every person as a unique expression of the divine. The purpose of this work is not to shame or exact retribution, but to learn to value every member of our community. True healing can only begin when we resolve to listen to marginalized voices, face uncomfortable truths, and commit ourselves to learning and doing better in pursuit of a truly beloved community.
Nicely done. Nicely done. What do you think the City of Golden should do now?
I think they're doing some of it with the trainings, and with holding people accountable for the act. I think we need to have more conversations about transparency and what that looks like in this work. And I think going forward, that's going to be very, very important because people of color are used to this sort of thing happening and then a few pretty words being spoken and then the whole thing being dropped. So we need to make sure that the things that are being put in place right now do actually happen. So the trainings are completed, all of that. And we need to make sure we address how how the system failed in this case, how the folks who were supposed to be notified weren't, and how we go about remedying that situation. But throughout, it has to be transparent. The BIPOC folks in the community especially have to know that these steps are being taken and that they're being taken seriously, because otherwise, like in so many other instances, it could just end up being pretty words, and that doesn't contribute to anybody's safety.
I wonder personally, as a biracial woman and as a Unitarian Universalist and as a minister, how you're doing with this.
It's a complicated question. There are always so many feelings. For me, obviously, this is very disappointing, upsetting. In some ways, not surprising, because in some ways, this is just not surprising to people of color when it happens. It happens a lot. It doesn't always make the news. So personally, as a person of color, yeah, it's upsetting that this would have been done in the first place. It's upsetting that it was handled the way it was, and it hits you right in the gut because, like I said, it's an act of terrorism. On the other hand, I think that the way our congregants have responded has been admirable. I think that the way that the city of Golden is responding to this now is encouraging, because I don't think it's the same response that we would have seen 10 years ago, even. I think people are starting to understand the kinds of impact that these sorts of incidents have on everyone. And as a minister, that's kind of my response. Racism, along with the rest of the oppressions, patriarchy, whether it's against BIPOC folks or against women or against trans folks, these incidents are meant to divide us, and they're meant to divide us by people at the top who want us squabbling with each other, so that we don't notice that the resources are being taken from the rest of us, right? There are people with an interest in division. And so our whole job as Unitarian Universalists, are to foster relationship and connection, because we are all part of the universal divine. We are already interconnected. And so our job is to nourish that interconnection. And that means getting rid of racism. It means banishing patriarchy. It means getting rid of ableism, all the isms that tell us that certain people aren't valuable, and that certain people aren't part of us. So as Unitarian Universalists, our whole job is to affirm that interconnection.
May I say amen?
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Jen. We appreciate it. We hope the next time we talk, there's better news.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You'll find several ideas for resistance work on the new website, commonflameuu.org. Go to the Serve tab, and Faithful Resistance is in the drop-down menu. If you have ideas and connections for other people to interview, please email us at faithfulresistance@commonflameuu.org. And do your best to put love at the center and keep on doing the next right thing. Go out and do the next right thing.